Hello, it's great to see you here. My name's Kavin, founder of KidCoach, dad of two kids, and I'm going to talk to you today about the little things that we parents can do that actually make a really big difference. So, thank you very much for tuning into this. And let me just say that you are in the right place if you think that children need very different skills to what you and I were probably taught as we were growing up. I mean, 21st century skills. Kids need to be more creative and communicate well and have more and better critical thinking and so on. So, if you think children need different skills, you're in the right place. Also, if you believe that we parents are actually amazingly, perhaps even uniquely placed to develop these sorts of skills in our children's lives, and that we play a huge, key, influential, shaping role. So if you believe that, you are also definitely in the right place. And hey, you're also in the right place if you enjoy a good conversation and you enjoy asking questions, potentially those questions without any right answer, to get into those deep and meaningfuls and those juicy conversations. So you're in the right place if any of those three apply to you, and hopefully they all do. Now, the session will be interactive, sort of, right? There's a limit to how much interactivity we can have in an online presentation like this, but certainly I'll ask you questions as we go along and invite you to pause and ponder what you might respond to that with. So if this was in person, I would be opening questions out to the floor, but seeing as this is online, you get what I mean, right? Try and make it interactive with yourself. So, real quick, so you know who is speaking to you, because that's normally nice, right? Who am I? I'm that little boy over there who looks awfully sick in front of the Taj Mahal. Um, this is a picture, as you can see, taken in 1995. Feels like an age ago. I was only 11 years old. We were in India on a holiday, visiting the Taj Mahal, as you can see. Sat next to me, smiling there, is my mum. Who has been, always will be, a hugely influential force in my life. She was actually a teacher and a tutor. I think I got the education gene from her. My sister also did. She's there standing in the red t-shirt in the background, a couple of years younger than me. She also went on to become a teacher. I went into the education space in a slightly different angle, as you're about to see. But you know, that little 11-year-old boy who looks a bit grumpy and sick grew up and now has his family of his own. This is my wife and my two kids. This picture is from a few years ago at my son's 1-year birthday party. It's one of those half-decent family photos that we have. They're all kind of color-coded and stuff in blues. So I'm married with two kids. My name, by the way, I should have mentioned, is Kavin Wadhar, and you're welcome to follow me on Twitter. You can see my handle here. Slightly unusual name, Kavin Wadhar. There's a long story to that, but essentially it's an Indian name, but not altogether a very common one. Anyway, a bit like Kevin, but Kavin Wadhar. More recently, even still, I've become the founder of an app called the KidCoach app, which is available on the app stores. It's a parenting app for busy parents to help them get their kids talking in fast and fun ways, which also secretly builds some of these 21st century skills we're going to talk about in a few moments. I'm soon, and this is really hot off the press, I'm also an author somehow. I never thought I would be an author, but I've just written a book called Little Big Conversations, and actually some of the material in this talk draws from that. So that is who I am. Let me tell you a quick story, which is kind of my aha moment. So there's this fable, one of these Aesop's fables, called The Wind and the Sun. It's my favorite fable, and I was reading it to my daughter a few years ago, actually from that very same book that I had 40 years ago, when I guess my mum was reading it to me. Anyway, so if you don't know the fable, real quick, there's a man walking along, as you can see, with a cloak on, and the wind and the sun spot him and decide to have a little bet. They wonder who can get the man to take his coat off first. So the wind steps up and he or she blows really hard. as you can see, tries to force the cloak off the man. But what happens, as you can guess? Well, the man just gets cold and hugs his coat ever tighter. So then the sun has a go, and what will the sun do? It will shine warmly and kindly and make the man hot from within and get the man to take his cloak off of his own accord. Now, every Aesop's fable has a moral, and the moral of this one is that you can't force people to do things. You have to use persuasion and influence and motivation to get somebody to do it from within, right? You need to use kindness, not force, in order to achieve an action. Clear, right? Well, not so to my young daughter Mia at the time, because she just said, "But Daddy, I don't understand. The wind is so strong. Can't he just blow the coat off the man?" And that led us very naturally into that discussion about, well, actually, it's better to use kindness and not force, and develop that motivation from within. And this little moment, this little coaching moment, only lasted 5 minutes or so. It only required a few choice words, a little conversation, but it's one of those moments that I'll never forget, which is why I'm telling you about it now, where my daughter got something, right? The penny drop. She's understood something that she'll probably understand now for the rest of her life. It was a coaching moment for her. But it's also a penny drop moment for me because, you know, as my daughter went to sleep soundly after that, but I couldn't, because I kept thinking, wait, maybe there are all sorts of other coaching moments that are just beckoning, where we can help not just my child, but all children realize something or learn something of their own accord, simply through conversation. And perhaps it just starts from asking the right questions. And my brain started firing a little bit, because at the time I was working in a corporate, in an education publishing corporate, and I'd heard a lot about the lack of skills, right? That especially the graduates coming in for new jobs and such, they seem to lack certain skills. And there's a lot of talk around the 4 C's as just one example, right? The 4 C's that we need as part of 21st century learning, these sort of 21st century skills that are required, these character traits that are required, which all very conveniently begin with a C. And you might have heard of some of these, I'm sure you have, so I'll just go to the next slide, right? So it's things like collaboration, communication, critical thinking, creativity, and so on. All of these lovely C words, you know, working well with people, speaking well in groups, problem solving, getting imaginative, and so on. And there are other C's as well, by the way. So the late, great Ken Robinson, who many of you will have heard of, he still has the highest ever views for a TED talk at 60 or 70 million now, I think. Anyway, he talked about these C's, but also other ones like C for citizenship, making somebody feel like they have agency in the world and are a part of it. Or C for compassion or empathy, right? Which is being in tune with the feelings of others and being people orientated and managing emotions and so on. So all these sorts of skills, right, we know our children need more and more and more, especially as the world is changing very, very fast and beckons for more of these sorts of skills. And so I was thinking, you know, perhaps we could use these little parenting conversations at home to develop certain skills like this. Because here's the thing. How much time do you reckon kids actually spend at school versus at home, right? So little question for you. You know, just ponder this for a moment. For children that go to school, and I appreciate not every child goes to school, but for those that do, when you think about their waking hours, how much time in the year, how many of those waking hours across the year do they actually spend at school, supposedly learning? Is it less than 20%, 20 to 40%, or more than 40%? You know, so I invite you just to think about this yourself and maybe put your left hand up if you think it's less than 20%, your right hand up if you think it's more than 40%, and maybe both hands up if you think it's in the middle, 20 to 40%. Now, I suspect that you've either got both hands up because it's in the middle, or the right hand up, more than 40%. But actually, the left hand is, and I appreciate I'm mirrored here, but the left hand of less than 20% would be the correct answer. children spend less than 20% of their waking hours across the year at school. You can do the math if you don't believe me, but essentially it's because of the long holidays and all those evenings and weekends. Not to mention the relatively short school day, right? It's only 9 to 3-ish. It's actually less than 20%. Now, this is very, very surprising for many, many parents that I asked this question to. It's actually not surprising at all for teachers. Teachers know this. I distinctly remember when I said this to one teacher, they said, yeah, Kavin, I know that. And actually, it's 16%. They knew more specifically what the number was. And in fact, I've seen some calculations that drop that down to more like 10% when you strip out time going between classes in the corridor or time spent at lunch or assemblies and so on. So in terms of actual learning, lesson, classroom time, it's very small. Now, what's my point? I'm not trying to knock schools. I'm not trying to say we don't need to go to schools. Absolutely not. We all know that schools play a pivotal role. Just look what happened during the COVID lockdowns. We really, really missed them, right? All I'm saying is that we parents are super, super influential, right? While our lives are very busy and hectic, for sure, I can relate, we actually have a lot of time when our kids are not at school and therefore probably with us or another caregiver, where we have arguably these moments of time, right? These few minutes here and there to have coaching conversations or to do other developmental type activities with them. And so how could we use that time a little bit more effectively? And I would like to suggest that conversation is one of these hands-free activities, perhaps the only one, that can be done while you're doing a whole bunch of other things, right? While we're driving our kids around in the car, maybe to go to school or maybe to take them to those extracurricular activities on the evenings and weekends, or even just to go to the shops, right? While we're walking around, again, perhaps on the school run or walking down to the shops or just walking around the park to get some fresh air. While we're cooking or doing something in the kitchen, be it chopping vegetables or whisking flour to make a cake, or cutting the meat or the fish, or whatever it might be, right? In the kitchen, again, we have our hands free, our voices are available to have these conversations. Also lying down in bed, right? Tucking our kids in to say goodnight. You know, that's probably not a time that you want to whip the iPad out or start a board game or a deck of playing cards or send them to a club or a camp, or all of which are amazingly developmental opportunities. But the humble conversation, I would say, is a single thread that runs between all of these different settings where, as busy as we are, and perhaps we could find a few minutes here and there to have an unusual conversation with our children that is developmental. And these are the sorts of questions that might help us do that. For example, if you invented a new color, what would you call it? If you invented a new color, what would you call it? I like this question because it's good for creativity, isn't it? I mean, just think about that yourself. What is a new color? I mean, assuming that you could find a new color, can you even visualize that in your head? What name would you give to that? What might it look good in? And so on, right? You can feel your brain firing as you have to be more imaginative and creative there. Or a totally different one. What do you find easy that was once hard? What do you find easy that was once hard? This one is great for confidence because we're always learning things. We're always getting better at things. We're always able to do things now that we couldn't do, say, a year ago. When I asked an 8-year-old boy this on our podcast, because I write these questions and I test them out on a whole bunch of kids on a podcast, he talked about running, right? He couldn't run very fast, but now he can. Now he finds that quite easy. And so that naturally led me to ask, well, how did you get better at it? And he just, well, I just kept practicing. I kept practicing. I said, well, why did you want to practice? He goes, well, because I wanted to win the race. He had a clear motivation, a clear goal. And he then realized that actually if he was then struggling at his times tables, or if you're struggling to make new friends, or whatever it might be, anything that he finds hard now, well, actually, it will become easy. He knows how to do that. He just needs to be motivated and to practice. And he had that example of running that he conquered in his mind as a result of this sort of conversation. Something completely different. Would chocolate rain be a good or a bad thing? Would chocolate rain be a good or a bad thing? So a silly, fun question. Obviously, there's no such thing as chocolate rain, but that's okay because it's fun to think about. Would it be good or bad? I love these questions because they're good for critical thinking. You could take any concept and look at its pros, look at its cons. What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? Would it be good? Would it be bad? And why? And I'll show you an example of that in a minute. But the thing that all these questions have in common is what? What do they have in common? I would say that all these questions have no right answer. There's no right answer. It's not like at school where 2 plus 2 equals 4. There's only one right answer, then we get marks on it. Actually, all of these questions are completely open-ended, but it doesn't actually matter what you say in terms of, you don't have to get the answer right. There is no right answer. It's about what you think and why you think that, and having a view and expressing a view, perhaps even debating a view if somebody thinks something else, which is fine. That's why I love these sorts of questions.